And joining me live on the news to talk about this is Salahuddin Hashimo, a security analyst. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, now what factors do you think may have contributed to the initial attacks in Plateau State?
First, I think there is also an issue of dereliction of duty from the side of the state actors. There were 37 distress calls that were made to security agencies for response, and that didn't happen because for some reasons they actually undermined that intelligence. There were letters that were initially dropped in those communities before those attacks were made, and this particular information was communicated to security agencies, particularly the Operation Safe Haven. But unfortunately, again, they let the people down in terms of their capability to respond, or I would say that their incapacity to respond. And this in itself is nothing but an operational incompetence that we have seen clearly playing out from the side of the state. And I think for us to preserve and save life, as contained in Section 14B of the 1999 Constitution, it is very important that we take the issue of response very important, very paramount, and very responsive. But I think on this one, the state security actors are let to put down because they did not act on intelligence, because that intelligence was actually in the open space before the attack happened on Christmas Eve.
Now talking about intelligence, what intelligence gathering methods would you recommend to be deployed in cases like this?
Human intelligence and human transmitters are very key elements in situations like this, because for every conflict situation, there is always some level of pattern that is left behind. And I will tell this for free. There is a particular community that is just, it's called Mangu. It's an autonomous community called Mangu. It is actually at the foot of the Bokos Hill. That particular autonomous community is actually a place where most of these attacks are always being orchestrated from. That community is actually on the south of the Nasarawa South. It is actually bordering Nasarawa. It's actually bordering Plateau, and it is very important that these are the kinds of scoping and then the kind of information gathering efforts that state actors should actually deploy. So if the state governor himself has actually said very clearly that most of the schools in Plateau has now become an abode for terrorists, then again, it tells you very clearly that somebody is not acting on intelligence. And you recall in his statement that he mentioned very clearly that there was going to be some level of reappraisal of the security architecture, which demonstrates very clearly that there are some fundamental challenges regarding response, regarding intelligence, and regarding how we deploy the use of intelligence for operational purposes. And I think for me, this is very fundamental. First of all, is to do some level of audit of communities where autonomous efforts and has become like a safe passage, a safe haven for most of these terrorists. And then, of course, that can help in terms of isolating areas and where security agencies can then take these fights to. But I can guarantee you that that community called Mangu at the foot of the Bokos Hill is actually a safe haven for terrorists. And I think security agencies should act swiftly and condone and curtail and prevent reoccurrence. Now, there is also another letter that has just been dropped and said that there's going to be an attack today. I just hope that, again, we don't record another harvest of death because of what we saw some few days ago, which was very heartrending and heartbreaking. I thought it's very important for security agencies to act very rapidly to this intelligence and prevent loss of lives.
Now, Salahuddin, in terms of intelligence reports, how do you think the security forces effectively can collaborate with local communities in strengthening defense mechanisms of communities like this?
Community policing, remember, community policing, not community police. Community policing has become one of the modern infrastructure for safeguarding lives and property. And I think it is very important that our state actors begin to understand setting up specific community liaison units within each operations. These community liaison units can help interface with communities on a various degrees of issues, and one of which will be to gather intelligence, and then of course to open this dialogue between state and community interface as a measure for response, managing, and of course responding to threats in the event that they have gathered them at any point. But I think it is very important to have first a review of our rules of engagement that should actually be community friendly as a measure to contain and make them participants in response decision-making process. That for me would be an issue to deal with. Second is a policy approach around community policing, where we should have a specific unit or perhaps a desk within each operations that actually responds basically to community needs and liaise directly with communities. These are modern architecture for safeguarding. These are modern architecture for protection. And I think that for me should be another entry point. And finally is an area that deals with scoping and intelligence gathering using human transmission technology, particularly. Technology must be deployed at every means as a way of also easing operations, because of course you cannot go swimming where you should actually use a speedboat. And technology in itself has suggested that you can cover more grounds rather than consistently finding efforts to remain on your feet. So I think there's a need for us to adopt technology as a measure to also deploy in terms of gathering information. And this technology we can use are just out there. There are a lot of open tools that we could use, but I think the Army is actually the father of inventions. Wristwatches, GPS, internet were all products of the military. So I think it is very important for the military to find a customized approach that actually works with it for it to be able to work more efficiently in terms of gathering information. And this would mean that you should find either it is area surveillance, whether it is use of existing open technology, or you want to actually design something that actually fits into your purpose.
Okay, Mr. Hashimo, yes, permit me to interject there. Permit me to interject. In the light of these current threats that has been issued, what strategic measures do you think can be employed to sort of, fortify this targeted community?
There's an open manual within the military for threats like this, for managing threats like this. And one of which is, first of all, to do some kind of show of force in communities where these kinds of threats have actually come in. So one is actually to rejig your operation and architecture. Yes, these guys know that you have specific locations where you have set up checkpoints and all that. So you need to find some kind of decoy in terms of how you also manage and respond to these guys. I mean, they are always a step ahead in terms of the pattern they have adopted. But again, for me, I think our poor strategy oftentimes has always resulted in fatalities because we don't change strategy. Our change strategy approaches takes a bureaucratic process, which we must find a way to reduce. The red tapes in the bureaucratic processes around safety and security has consistently put human lives in harm's way. So we must find a way to allow what we call on-site commanders to look at the adaptive strategy that help them to be able to respond very swiftly. What I would expect today is to see, one, a show of force in these communities, two, to see a rejig of the current structure. If you have specific checkpoints, I think it is very important to either add some more or to actually open up additional one and do what we call mapping, threat mapping, and look at what are the possible inlet and outlets where these marauders have always taken advantage of, and then of course cordon these areas and increase your surveillance on that particular route. And thirdly is to also look out for informants in communities and in local areas whose movement are very suspicious. I can guarantee you, from the moment somebody must have dropped that letter, from the moment that letter is dropped, there's a need for us to be able to increase the level and the intensity of the kind of surveillance we do, just to be able to make sure that we arrest those who are behind this heinous act.
I must sincerely thank you for your time on the news. Salahuddin Hashimo, security analyst. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much for having me.